how to choose an executive search firm, either for your portfolio executive hire or a professional within your private equity firm. Firstly, we tell all of our clients that if you can fill the role yourself, you definitely should be doing. I know that's pretty counterintuitive, especially coming from an executive search firm itself, but if this is a simple fill and you're pretty confident you can find the best person, then there's no reason to go out to an agency, executive search firm, recruitment business, whatever you call them. You can do this yourself, but if you can't, that's when you need to call on an executive search firm. But before you do that, you need to assess whether you need to reach out to a firm like Raw Selection or not. I'm going to list out some following questions, which gives you an opportunity to reflect and then see, do I need to reach out to Raw Selection, or do we have the in-house capability to be able to fill this position? First question is this role fillable via what I'd regard as the classic easy methods? Could you be putting a post out on LinkedIn? Could you be putting a post out on maybe an advert on a job board or an industry website? Could you be putting an advert maybe on LinkedIn? Do you have an internal network? There's loads of different ways that you can obviously fill a role internally. Now, you've got to assess yourself whether that role is particularly difficult or the particular criteria in there is hard. But if you can fill it via your own methods and means and it's fairly simple, it's worth doing so yourself. Another thing that I really recommend is, and sometimes our clients get stumped up on this, is making sure that you've asked everybody in your company and asked them for a referral. So if within your private equity firm and you're hiring for, let's say, an associate you take from the best top 3 investment banks or the top 3 management consulting firms, you're going to have hired people from there before, and they're going to know people the year below them potentially, or people that may be able to tap into that network. So it's worth asking that question. Who do you know that fits this criteria for us to hire an associate? Equally, within your executives, if you're making an appointment within your portfolio company, and obviously it's not a confidential role, it's not a replacement position, it's something you're happy to share. One thing I do find very odd is that they fail to ask the executives of the portfolio companies that they already have. These guys have usually got pretty good networks. They've usually got pretty good contacts. So ask the question, drop them an email. We're hiring for this position. Who would you recommend that we contact? Something else that I tend to find is that when there's a search, especially within the portfolio side of things, there can be extra challenges that maybe you haven't foreseen, or maybe you have foreseen and that you haven't built into the criteria. And therefore, when you go through the full search process, you kind of get to the end and you've got a slate of 4 candidates and you're not very happy. So it's worth really reviewing what criteria you have for this particular search and who you're going to bring in. But what are the challenges? Now, if these challenges are pretty niche and you're going to need somebody with a particular skill set, it's probably worth going out to an executive search firm, because it might be that that person is particularly difficult to find. But, and equally on the other hand, if you feel it's fairly simple and there's quite a broad here and there's maybe not big challenges to face, and you feel you've got the network, it might be worth doing it yourself. Another challenge for a lot of firms is the type of person that they're going after. Now, I believe every role needs a top performer. Every role needs the kind of criteria of passion, drive, motivation, or what I regard as the attitude type skill set, and then obviously the experience side. Now, if you're needing somebody either from a competitor or you're needing somebody from kind of top tier, it might be difficult for you to be able to kind of attract and pull people out of similar and competing businesses if you're going after the active type seeker. Now, I'm not saying the active seeker is not a good candidate, but sometimes it can be that if you want a full scope of the market, then you're going to have to go after the passive or the not looking seeker of profile and candidates. So it's whether or not you've got that ability to be able to drive in and identify competitors of either your portfolio company or your own private equity firm and make those approaches. Again, that's got to be you that's got to make that call. I'd say most important is, do you have the time to fill this position? Something we get regularly asked is, why don't we fill this ourselves? And, what we've just gone through is exactly what I would share. But do you have the time? There's a reason I've got an accountant and a finance and various different others that do all the invoicing and everything else that comes with the back office, P&L accounts. And it's not because there's probably an element of finance that I wouldn't be able to do, but in the most part, I could probably work it out. But do you have the time? Is it well worth allocating that time on there? Can you really afford to be taking yourself away from originating new deals? Managing, obviously, your private equity firm and your role within that business. Closing deals and managing your portfolio companies. And of course, if you're in a portfolio company already and you're a C-suite exec and you're listening to this, do you really have the time to take away from taking this business in, depending how long you've been there, 3 to 5 years on average, 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is, if you're a private equity firm, to take this business to exit, what will miss out on the basis that you're spending this time here? Now, if that is, yes, I've got the time, we've got the bandwidth, then go for it. If you haven't, and you've got a lot of challenges and there's other areas you need to be focused on in the business, it's probably not worth your time driving into hiring and going through the process, especially if you're not going to have that success or that risk of no success or the wrong person in the end. How do you identify the best executive search firm to work with? So here's some questions that I'd be asking if I was you of executive search firms, and these are key. And if they can't answer these questions, guys, I'd be very wary. What I've found in private equity is that every firm manages via KPIs, metrics, systems, processes. And your portfolio, I'm sure, and even your private equity firm is probably no different. So if you're speaking with a supplier and they don't know their numbers, they're not familiar with, they don't understand it, it's probably likely that they're not very good. It might be in the off chance that they are good, but do you really want to take that risk? Question number 1 is, what is your completion rate on searches? So every search firm will have different, or most likely have different level of services. It may just be contingent. Usually it's contingent and retained. For Raw Selection, we've got contingent, engaged, and retained. If you haven't heard of engaged before, it's a bridge between contingent and retained. So you want to be having that conversation of what is your completion rate on those searches. So as of filming this, we're at 100% completion rate on all engaged and retained services. But our contingent rate drops down because our clients cancel searches. They don't, they fill it internally, or something else happens, or whatever else outside of our control. So it's likely your contingent's going to be lower, but your engaged and retained, or if it's just retained, should be a very high percentage of completion. And if they can't give you that number, won't give you that number, then I'd be very concerned. Time to shortlist is another one. So what we tend to hear in the market is it usually takes about 2 to 3 months to get a shortlist of candidates, which personally I believe is ridiculous. If a firm's a specialist in their market and a specialist within their niche, then they should be able to pull up a shortlist quicker than 2 to 3 months. What you're typically going to be looking for here is anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously, if it's a really remote position, even then can be a little bit longer, but shouldn't be hitting kind of 2 to 3 months or anywhere near that. You want someone who can operate very quickly, who's got a very good handle on the market already. And what you're looking for really is when they have that level of pace, it means that they're actually already embedded within their market. When you're having to take 2 to 3 months to get a shortlist, it probably means that they're starting from scratch, and therefore they're building and warming that network up from maybe 2 or 3 people rather than 50 to 100 type of people. And therefore it's going to take longer, and you're probably not going to get the broad spectrum of the market. Another one which is quite regularly asked is, what industry do you operate in? Now, I'm not saying that recruiters can sometimes be a specialist in whatever you're in, but that can regularly be the case. I would go onto their website and review where they're at. If they're recruiting absolutely everything, private equity, public markets, I'd be very wary. Look at the businesses that are specialists within your area and specialists within your niche. And they're the people that are going to have those networks and be able to reach out to people quicker. And they're also, linking to the point previously, are the people that are going to get you those shortlists quicker. So question number 5, what volume of searches do you work on at any one time? Now, contingent recruiters typically work on anywhere between 5 and 7 searches at any one time, because usually they're at a 1 in 5 to 1 in 7 placement ratio. Again, not always a recruiter's fault. Clients cancel searches, client works with 7 agencies, they promote somebody internally, something else happens. So I'm not saying that they're bad recruiters, there's just loads of facets that consider alongside that. If you want a really focused effort, it's got to be 2 to 3 searches. Anything more than that within the individual that you're working with is going to be too much. A key question a lot of the more well-renowned search firms have, they tend to have a reputation for not working on the search themselves. You're dealing with the top person, maybe a partner or a principal or whatever they call it within their firm. Engagement manager seems to be a popular title. But when it comes down to it, they actually don't work on your search and they don't really look at it. They pass it on to an associate who's been in there 5 minutes and they're on the process for you. This happens especially in the lower to middle market, because if you're working at large cap, you're working with Warburg Pincus, Carlyle Group, etc., then their salaries typically, especially for their portfolio, are going to be considerably higher than within a 50 million, 100 million, 10 million revenue business in comparison with a 500 million revenue business. So therefore you can understand that the average fee will therefore be higher. So maybe they still pass it off, I don't know, but certainly we get a lot of feedback from companies, certainly asking us, which is great, who works on your search. And you want the person that you're speaking to, providing the right experience and you're happy with them, to be working on your search. Obviously, there needs to be other people in that search process as well if you're going down an engaged or retained route, but you definitely need people who are in the know what they're doing, to be working on your processes. Another couple of questions. What is your candidate vetting process? You want them to have a detailed process of how they interview, what kind of questions they ask, and get into some questions about what they do and how they identify a good or high-performing individual. Another really good question is, how do you sell the role in our company? Something I think that's missed off a little bit is that ability to sell and engage. If you watch famous selling films, you'll notice that these guys are very engaging. They're very persuasive and influencing the individual. I'm not saying that you go down the Wolf of Wall Street and stood at the front tapping your chest type scenario, but we want somebody who's engaging and who can sell. So you've got to be able to assess, how do they really understand your business and the information there, and how do they separate you from everyone else that's hiring at the moment. If you're watching this and it's only just gone out, you'll probably realize that this is one of the most competitive markets that I've ever seen in executive search and recruitment in general. So it's very competitive right now. So how is this recruiter selling your firm or your portfolio company to this private equity professional or portfolio executive? Number 9, how do you keep your clients updated? How do you tell them what's happening, what's going on? Another frustration I hear from a lot of clients is, start the process, 2 to 3 months later, we get a shortlist. 2 to 3 months later, we're fighting with the recruiter because they haven't come up anybody, and they're blaming the private equity firm, blaming the portfolio company because it's outside of patch or its salary's too low. That continuous update, what do you do to update us, and how do you update us? Now that's a really key attribute. Every time that you work with Raw Selection, every 2 weeks on engaged and retained searches, you will get a search update, which will have a list of the profiles that we've interviewed, list of profiles rejected, list of profiles we submitted, and you will receive that every 2 weeks until completion of the search, and then you will get a full review. So you know what's happening, and obviously this goes on top of all the consistent communication you have with the person leading your search. So that consistent communication is key, and nobody likes to be kept out of the dark. And too many bad scenarios have happened in recruitment where they've gone cold, you've not heard from them in ages, it's difficult to get in touch with the recruiter. That can't happen and shouldn't happen. So making sure that they have a consistent update process. And again, if it's woolly and not detailed with regards to how they do it, be very wary. Last but not least, and one of the things I think is the most important part, is, what is your guarantee? Too many search firms are coming in and telling you that, yeah, we'll take your money up front, we can fill this role, we're experts, we're specialists, and then when it comes down to it, you're losing your money up front. I've heard some absolute horror stories from some of the big firms, some of the smaller firms, taking an obscene amount of capital up front for a search process and delivering absolutely nothing. And it honestly makes me very frustrated and very disappointed in the industry. We both are in this together. Yes, searches are difficult. Yes, searches can be tough. But if you're going in partnership with a private equity firm or a portfolio company, you're paying for a service, and nobody wants to pay for something and not get a delivery on it. Obviously, the update process shares what's going on and that consistent communication. But if you've got a guarantee that, look, if you're not happy with our service, then we'll refund you the upfront payment, which is exactly what we do at Raw Selection with our engaged and retained services. At least you're comfortable in knowing that these guys are going to be working for their money, rather than taking 100% of the fee up front and then disappearing off into the ether. So that's my advice for working with an executive search firm. Should you have any questions, or you want to discuss that with me, or I'm happy to share, or happy to listen to some of the war stories that you certainly have, and I'll share some of the ones I've heard too, please reach out to me. It's alex.rawlings@raw-selection.com, and happy to obviously help if you have a search. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you got some value from this video.